In 1859, in distant Australia, a fateful encounter with the past appeared on the horizon of a new life. Thomas Austin, a British expat who became a successful sheep farmer, enjoyed the fruits of his labor. A magnificent mansion, riding horses, and a vast estate of 11,000 hectares. However, among the luxury and comfort, he still lacked one thing: the true atmosphere of his homeland. Far from the green hills of England, he felt that this particular element was the missing part of his new life. Thomas wanted to relive those moments that would remind him of his childhood, of weddings in the countryside, and long walks through emerald fields. Realizing that he couldn't just bring back his native landscapes, Austin thought of another solution. He asked his nephew to bring some cute creatures from England to breathe life into his estate. "Bring some blackbirds, thrushes, partridges, and a couple dozen European rabbits," he wrote in his letter. "I am convinced that hunting them will be a great weekend activity. Besides, the presence of these rabbits will not harm the country," he added with a touch of irony, not even imagining the scale of this frivolous decision. Thomas's every word, uttered with hope and carelessness, struck a spark on an uncharted land. Soon, Austin got his rabbits. These cute creatures, conceived as a simple entertainment, began their conquest of the continent. Let it be one or two rabbits, it would not harm the maintenance of the ecosystem, Austin thought. However, he did not even realize that he was deciding the fate of life in Australia for decades to come. In the short decades around this second coming, just looking at the statistics was enough to figure out which colony the innocent creatures were in. 10 years later, there were so many rabbits on the continent that every hunter's day off turned into a hunt for hundreds of carcasses. The flow of rabbits driven out of their burrows became so extensive that it caused excitement among the local residents. Of course, hunting alone was no longer enough to cover the number of such uninvited guests. According to reports at the time, 2 million rabbits easily coped with the industrial turmoil of hunting and increased their numbers effortlessly. In 1920, when exports of these pests seemed to be peaking, Australia became the unintended home to more than 10 billion European rabbits. This allowed them to be located with a density of up to 3,000 individuals per square kilometer, which became a real threat to the environment. Local species did not resist this pressure enough. A sad scenario in which another popular species, the emu, began to suffer due to this uninvited invasion was observed across the country. Every year, more and more desperate farmers began to write letters to the government, asking for help in fighting the invasion, which seemed to have no end. Rabbits, at first glance, might seem innocent and cute with upturned noses, but as it turned out, they turned into real killing machines. Faced with a shortage of food, they were willing to eat literally anything that came their way, including their own poop. This was their peculiarity. In fact, they could effortlessly adapt to their environment and survive even in the most adverse conditions. Their underground burrows, which were complex structures, were full of life, hierarchies, and perhaps their own rabbit dramas. And yet, despite the family difficulties, rabbits had one ability that contributed to their expansion. They were obviously immune to oceanic and mountainous obstacles. At the end of the last ice age, all the rabbits in the world were feeding on the Iberian Peninsula and several areas of France and North Africa. These cunning creatures began to expand their horizons. The ancient Romans, who loved rabbits for their tender meat, brought a couple of individuals to Italy, and the Vikings in turn captured them, setting out to conquer new lands. During the colonization period, the British, having gained a taste for new horizons, brought rabbits with them to provide their growing colonies with food during sea expeditions. Finding themselves on each new continent, rabbits dispersed all over the world and now exist on all continents except Antarctica. So funny to look at, this species has become a real disaster for the ecosystems they inhabit. Going into the deep terrariums of their underground life, rabbits ravaged everything in their path, absorbing pastures and crops, which undoubtedly penetrated into the poor farms and crushed agriculture. Their aggressive and rapid reproductive success gave confidence to farm owners, seeing once blooming fields covered with a gray-yellow blanket consisting of these insane appendages. Exhausted farmers were looking for ways to combat the invasion, realizing that more and more remained beyond control. After years of struggle, the government began to impose restrictions and taxes on the transfer of rabbits to other regions, joining the efforts to return them to their homeland. But alas, as this war entered the new millennium, the basis of the problems remained the same. So the struggle between man and rabbit continues, with an insistence that unwittingly negates all efforts to control the population. Terrible and harmless, the rabbit has become a symbol not only of the destruction of natural resources, but also of inaction or incompetence on the part of the authorities. This symbiotic relationship between humans and rabbits proved that invasions and waging war on nature are never an easy solution. Reflecting on the story of Thomas Austin and his rabbits, one can think about how a naive desire to return the touch of his childhood can lead to a large-scale catastrophe. A rabbit is just a rabbit, many people will think. What's so terrible about it? However, the simplicity of this statement hides the answer to more complex questions. How responsible are we for our actions, and do we remember how we influence the world around us? This fascinating story about Austin and his precious collection of rabbits highlights a significant truth. Our often lightweight decisions can have results that will torment us for generations to come. While Thomas Austin hoped only for the joy and atmosphere of his childhood, his actions led to the greatest environmental challenge that affected everyone, from individual farmers to large government organizations that seek to restore order to their lands. In the story of this rabbit drama, we see that not every one of our choices turns out to be simple or harmless. And although Thomas Austin did not imagine that his precious lock would have such global consequences, we can learn a lesson from his story. Being able to return your life to its previous form seems like a simple solution, but it can have far-reaching consequences. Ultimately, this story of rabbits in Australia tells us that our every choice matters, and we must remember that our responsibility to the future and to the environment is something that we must do every day, every hour, and every moment.